Hey guys, this is my tutorial on how to make a denim jacket, just like Levi's. Get your popcorn, get your drinks and get comfortable and be prepared to learn because I'm going to talk you through it stage by stage. Okay, so in this first kind of section, I've got what's called like a cast or a die, and that's where I've cut out the shape of the pocket flap, which is what I've started with. And I've created the same pattern piece but reduced it by 1 centimeter, and I've used that as my guide to create my stitch line, as you can see. And the way I do my corners is, I learned this whilst working at Ralph and Russo. I cut the corners at a 45-degree angle. And notice that I leave probably like 1 millimeter of fabric. And then I go to the iron and then I press one side inwards, as you can see in the kind of clip now. So I do this in stages, and then I kind of turn it around and give it a nice press. So what this machine I'm working on now is, it's a twin needle machine, and it's just a quicker way to do 2 rows of stitching at the same time. You know, you don't have to have one. I mean, because I run a factory, it saves a lot of time. But this is what I'm going to use for the purposes of making this denim jacket, and it also gives a certain finish. You know that crinkle finish you get when you see denim jackets, then it has that crinkle between the 2 stitches. It's this machine that helps feed the fabric in a particular way to give you that finish. But you know, if you don't have it, it's fine. Just use a regular straight stitch machine and do your twin needles, and it'll take you a bit longer, but don't worry about it. Now at this stage, I start working on the front body part. And what am I doing there? I'm using a seam allowance of 1.5 centimeters to stitch the outer panel with the middle panel and the center front panel. There is another way you can do this. You can use what's called a 5-thread, which we have, which is an overlocker that does a straight stitch and an overlocker at the same time. I think for this kind of demonstration, I just wanted to use the straight stitch and use overlocker separately. So I've done the exact same thing to the other side, just making sure that I'm placing the fabrics the right side up, and then jumping onto the overlocker and overlocking the edges neatly. There is another option where you can, what do they call it, a run and fell seam, which is where you get the top and the bottom of the seams that are folded in. So ultimately you get something that looks like that. And there's a particular machine that does that we don't have, because we're not a denim specialist factory. But if you go to any denim factory around the world, a proper one, they will have that machine. And it's actually a nicer way to finish off seams, really. And then, yeah, so after I've overlocked that, I've jumped onto the twin needle machine and done 2 rows of stitching on all of my front seams, as you can even see in this jacket there. Sometimes when you work with denim, like proper denim, your hands actually get black, and that's because the dye rubs off onto your fingers, so that's a bit annoying. So as you can see, there's a little step at the top there, and that's where my chest pocket is going to be. And what I've done is I've pressed some fusion tape near the top, and I'm gonna stitch 5mm seam allowance because that fusion tape just stabilizes the kind of fabric when we turn the pocket around, that you'll see in a minute. So once we stitch that, then we cut a 45-degree angle into the corner, but be very careful not to stitch the actual, cut the actual stitch itself. Then when you fold it the right way around, and then you take it over to the ironing board and give it a really nice press. Voila, there you go. And then you give it a top stitch. Normally you'd give it a, probably like a 1 or 2 millimeter top stitch on the edge, just to help the fabric sit flush. Cool, nice. So I think what we're going to do next is add the reverse side of the pocket bag. Now what I've got there is a die for the pocket, and that's so that I can stitch the pocket from the top side up. So you see the angled shape here at the front of my jacket. Tracing around that piece with chalk just helps me stitch a straight line, as opposed to doing it the reverse side, where you may not get such a clean finish. Also, I've used a copper color thread. I think it's a Gutermann 50, which is a really strong thread, and I just wanted to create a really nice contrast between the fabric that I've used and the thread color. And also the fabric I've used is a selvage denim. So that is one of the most expensive denims that you can get. So if you can, always go for selvage denim. If not, just use the regular one. What I'm doing in this clip here is overlocking my pocket bag now that I've stitched the pocket closed. Cool, so that's coming together quite nicely. And then I'm sewing together my top yoke using that 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. And this is where the fabric really starts to get bulky. So you really need to take your time and use quite a thick needle. You probably want to use either a 90 or 100 sized needle, because that will really break through the fabric and punch through without snapping. Because I'd say in total, thinking about the pocket bag, thinking about the yoke, thinking about the lower jacket, you're probably stitching through at least 6 layers of thick fabric already. Now, when you get to overlocking, at this point in the footage, my needle actually broke. So I had to stop and rethread the machine and then change needles. But eventually, once I overcame that, hopped onto the twin needle, which already has quite large, I think 100 size needles in it already, and did my top stitch. So that tackled that pretty easily, which I was super happy about, because the last thing you want is for a twin needle to break needle or break stitch. It is a long process. Okay, so I kind of done this in a pretty haphazard way and jumped onto my collar after I'd made up the front. And the way, I'd fused my collar one side, and then as I'd stitch the corners, I actually reduced the stitch length as you get to the very corner, because what that does is when you turn the collar around, it helps the stitch not to break, and you most times you get a nicer finish on the corner when you use like a number 2 or a number 1.5 stitch length. And then, as before with the pocket flaps, I cut the corner at an angle, about 1 millimeter from the corner, folded it back on one side, turned it around. I had to use an unpicker for this. I've actually got a video that link's coming up now on how to create the perfect corner. My technique will never fail you. I learned it from a guy from Dior. So try it yourself and let me know how it turned out for you. This took a while to kind of coax through, It is a thick fabric, so you really want to take your time, and the last thing you want to do is break the stitch. So what you might have to do is apply a bit of steam to soften the fabric, and that will help you turn around that corner. One thing I did was, when I was pressing the collar, because there's a bulk of fabric, I got the hammer and gently hammered down the corners just to get everything flat. Because what will happen is, when you get to stitching your collar, you don't want any part of the collar to be trapped in the dog feed of the machine, because that will scratch the fabric, and it will also mean that you end up with a really unpleasant kind of buckle of stitching at the corner. And that's normally how you measure how well a collar's been done. Cool. So I've top stitched my collar at this point. I've probably used a number 5 stitch length. And you can see it's feeding through really nicely. And one tip, guys, is when you're top stitching corners, always stop with the needle down, lift up the foot only, swing the fabric round, and sometimes you can use the handle just to guide the stitch forward until you feel comfortable that the machine will go without the fabric staggering. Now, I didn't use the twin needle machine for the collar. This was just down to personal preference. It can work, that's how they do it in factory, but I just wanted to do the 2 rows of stitching for the collar on the normal single needle lock stitch. And as you can see, that's creating a beautiful stitch. And the thing is, I'm kind of doing this by eye, because there should be a gap of about 9 millimeters from one stitch to the other. So in the haphazard way I do things, I'm starting on the back of my my denim jacket. So in the side panels first, with that 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. And then overlocking the seams as normal. And then jumping onto my twin needle to top stitch my two off-center back seams. And I think it's your decision whether you want the seams to face outwards or inwards. I've never really known the rule about that. It's probably personal preference, I think. Cool, so at this point, I'm just about to stitch the top back yoke onto the lower part of my back. And then overlock that first before I twin needle that. Well, one thing I will say is that when you're attaching the yoke onto the back, that's a testament to how well you follow the seam allowances, because certain times I've attached my yoke and the yoke has either been too small or it's been too big compared to the rest of the back. So if you get it exactly, then know you're heading in the right direction. You're not gonna have to recut or reshape any of the pieces. Cool, so that's been top stitched. Now I'm jumping onto the pocket welts. I'll give those a quick press, and they have been fused already. The thing is, the way I work is not very orthodox, and it's more out of boredom why I jump from like the front to the back to the collar to wherever. At this point, I'm creating the rectangle shape for my Welt pocket. So I'm stitching the pocket bag to the front of the jacket, right sides together. And I've pre-marked my pocket shape. Now, once that's been stitched securely, I'm gonna open that up, and then as before, I'm gonna cut to the corners at an angle, and you have to be careful not to cut the stitch, because if you cut the stitch, then you pretty much have to start again. So really take your time, use a very sharp pair of scissors. This is so important. So you're cutting what's called a mitre at this point. And then what you should be able to do, I think on this one I made a bit of an error. So even the best of us make mistakes. So I hop onto the iron, I turn it the right way around, give it a really good press. And the thing is, you'll know from when you turn the pocket on the inside, you'll already see the shape starting to form. Is that corner nice and clean? Because even though pressing can cover some mistakes, there are things like what I'm doing now in this kind of footage here, that pressing is not going to cover. So at this point, I'm positioning my welt on the inner side of the opening, and then top stitching one side, but notice I'm leaving the side closest to the side seam open, because that's where obviously your hand goes in. Giving that a 1mm top stitch. Notice I haven't back stitched at all. So I've started from the narrow side, gone up the long side, and gone back up the narrow side at the top. And what that does is it locks in the welt in place. Then the next step would be to, once you cut the threads, fold over the pocket bag, and then it's time to close the pocket bag. But this time you go over that top side stitch from near the corner. You probably want to do a bit of back stitch. Bear in mind, later on, you're going to do what's called a bar tack, which is a reinforcement stitch at these particular points. You stitch down the longer side and make sure that the welt doesn't get trapped in that stitch, because that is where your hand opening is going to be for the pocket. And then you finish at the lower side where you started previously, and then you should have a nicely finished welt pocket. So at this point, I'm attaching the front to the back at the shoulders using my 1.5cm seam allowance. There are certain jeans jackets that double up the yoke fabric at the back, but I've chosen not to do that. And as per normal, I'm gonna hop on my trusty overlocker, and then I'm gonna hop on my trusty twin needle and get those stitches nice and flat. Now, what you're not seeing, guys, is me pressing. I would probably say 60% of each stage I do, I'm pressing afterwards. Depending on how skilled you are with denim, you don't really need to do that, because as long as your handling of the fabric is at a good level, you don't need to press at every stage. But if you are a beginner, then I would certainly advise that. So now I'm doing a holding stitch, attaching my collar with a 0.5cm holding stitch. And notice I'll start from the center back, just to make sure that the notches for the back of my collar and the back of the jacket, they meet. And I'll stitch one side in place, and I'm next gonna mirror both my left and right side and cut a notch of where the collar stops. And I'm gonna start from that point to do the other side. And then we should meet nicely at the back without any kind of puckers. So this is nicely held in our collar, and you can see the jacket nicely taking shape. Now this is the facing, so the inner part of the jacket. There's many ways to finish this, but the way I've done it is I've overlocked it first. Bear in mind, I've also fused the facing with a very, very light fusing, because later on we're going to add buttonholes. And then once I've overlocked it, I've turned the edge round by about 5mm and done a very fine edge stitch just to hold that fold in place, and then I'm gonna press it. There are denim jackets where they actually stitch this down on the actual denim jacket, but that's not the look I was going for this one. And you can see that grey fusion there on the reverse side. Lovely. Okay, cool. So I think next I'm probably gonna make a start attaching the facing to the actual body of the jacket, using this time a 1 centimeter seam allowance, and using that same technique when we get to the top of the corner is slowly reducing the stitch length from like a 3 to a 2 to a 1, and then stop with the needle down, pivot. And you really need to take your time with this because you're dealing with more fabric, so you want to make sure you don't stitch the wrong places. And I think at this point, yeah, so you know before we used the 5mm holder stitch for the collar. This time, because I'm using the 1 centimeter seam allowance, I'm hiding that holding stitch within the facing. And again, cutting those corners at a right angle, folding them in and giving them a nice press. Cool. So I've chosen to do a single edge stitch on the kind of front of my jacket. And again, this is where you take time. You kind of use the same technique as you do with the collar, where you kind of hammer some of the fabric in the corner in just to get it nice and flat, so there's no staggering the fabric when you're doing this, your top stitch. And what I've chosen to do, I've run my stitch slightly past the collar, just so it sits a bit nicer. It's all these little details that you'll notice on like Levi's denim jackets, that you want the denim jacket to look like a denim jacket that's been made in a factory, not made in a shop. So at this point, I've started to sew my sleeves. The way I cut the jacket is that one part of my sleeve I actually used the selvage, so I only had to overlock the other side. And then I've marked the top of my cuff opener, which I think was about 10 centimeters, stitched the back sleeve with the front sleeve. And then what am I doing here? I'm turning in my cuff opening. So like, see this part? So I'm doing that in 2 stages because the cuffs are meant to overlap. So I think that the underside, I've probably used a 5mm fold over, and then the top side I've used a 1 centimeter fold over, and it makes a big difference. So that's the selvage that I'm talking about, that I've used on one side of the of my sleeves. And whenever you use a selvage, you don't really need to overlock. You know, that selvage is a sign of quality in the garment. So when I've done my cuff opening, I hopped onto the twin needle, and I started just at the top of the cuff opening, because later on I'm going to do a bar tack, or I might even do rivets, just to secure that edge that I've started at there. Cool, so at this point, this is where I'm going to start attaching my sleeve. So this is really where you see the garment coming together. And This is where you really need a really good pattern cutter, because if your sleeves are too big or too small, it just makes the garment look just absolutely just horrible. And I'm getting to the point here where I'm having to match the seam on my sleeve with the back yoke seam. And again, that's a sign of having a good pattern cutter. That's a sign of whether or not you're a good machinist, because this is all going to make your finished product look like it's factory made, not homemade. Because customers that buy products, they may not know how to make it, but they know how it's meant to look. So now overcome the difficulty of sewing the sleeve on, having matched the notches. Now I'm using my twin needle to top stitch the sleeve. And again, this is where you need to pay attention, because you're having to pull the fabric apart separately, so that you don't get any kind of lip in the head of the sleeve. You want a really nice finish, and that allows it to sit flush on the shoulders. And the thing is, when you sew, you want to be moving with the fabric. So you're sewing a armhole, which is a curved piece. So you want to curve your body as well. It's kind of like you're doing a dance with the sewing machine and the fabric. Okay, so this is where I'm sewing the side seam closed from the cuff to the armhole all the way down, doing that in one continuous stitch as they would do in a denim factory like Levi's. I think the only difference that Levi's would do is that they would use their 5-thread to do this all in one go. But the difficulty is you have to do like a holding stitch to ensure that the underarm seam matches, because it's very difficult to do on a 5-thread. Just a reminder, the 5-thread is a machine that does a stitch and an overlock all in one motion. Like I said, we've got one of those, but I didn't really want to use it to construct this denim jacket. So this is the other side that I'm doing. And then once that's been done, overlocking all of the seams, and then ready to turn it around. Now, as you guys notice, when you sew a garment, the more pieces you add together, the more it gets fiddly. So you really need to take your time. Overlock is one of the worst things to do, where if you're overlocking, I'm not sure if this has happened to you, you've overlocked a garment and then you've caught, like, I don't know, the collar in the overlock and it's chopped off. So really take your time. I've been doing this for a long time, so obviously I'm doing this faster than most people, but you really want to do things once when it comes to sewing. You want to do things once and you want to do things well. So at this point, what am I doing here? I think I'm jumping onto my cuffs, which is 2 pieces of fabric that I've pre-fused. Now there's a number of ways of doing these cuffs, but the way I'm doing it is that I'm attaching the cuff to the good side of my sleeve first, right sides to right side. And then I'm going to hop on the iron and then press in the fold on the top side. Cool, so that's, okay, so I've jumped onto the, I think I've done the right sleeve first, now I'm doing the left sleeve the exact same way. Mm. Cool, nice. So I've pressed my half fold, I've pressed in the top of the cuff, and I've pressed in the sides. So much to, I guess, a lot of people think that you sew cuffs inside out, but the way you sew denim, because the fabric is so thick, you press all the sides in, and then you sandwich it on top. And this is where your pressing skills have to be bang on, because when you top stitch it, you have to top stitch everything precisely so that all the seams align. So what I'm doing first is my border stitch, and that's starting from the top of my cuff, following it all the way around and going to the end. And bear in mind, I'm leaving this inside part open. The finishing touch is done on the twin needle, or alternatively, you can do this on your straight stitch. Because the point of starting with the cuff ends is so you trap everything in place. So sometimes you might have sewn a cuff before and the cuff kind of finishes longer than the actual sleeve itself. So this prevents that kind of deggedy finish. So now I'm doing the exact same process in terms of how to sew the cuff, the sleeve cuff, with sewing the waistband on. Made a bit of an error there, so I'm having to start again. Cool. And I haven't fused the whole of the waistband, because it's only the parts where the buttonholes are going to be that need to have, fusing in it. So again, stitching that 1 centimeter seam allowance. And the reason why I had to do the waistband in this way is because I was joining two pieces together. So see that join there, that had to match in the middle. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have had to start again. Because even with factories like Levi's, they just have one piece of fabric that they just reel off and then they chop off the excess. Cool, so we're getting to the end of the process, guys. Putting everything on the iron, laying that waistband dead flat, getting everything to sit nicely, and then I'm folding in my waistband hem. And notice I'm using the selvage. I don't need to double turn the inside of the waistband because I want to show off that I'm using selvage, show off it's an expensive fabric, and show off my finishing. Nice. And as you can see, I'm folding in those ends so they sit bang on the kind of placket line, basically. So you get a nice flush finish. And what you want to be mindful is when you're pressing is match up the bottoms of your cuff, overlap them together just to see that if it's meant to be 5 centimeters depth, that both of them are 5 centimeters. What you don't want is for one to be 6 centimeters and the other to be 5, or one to be 5.5 and the other to be 5. Even though you're making for yourself, just think if you're doing a product for a client, whether it's one-off or for a commercial customer, they will double check these things. So make sure that your finishing is A-star. And it's okay to start again. There's no rush. No one's running after you. Take your time. So we're nearly on that home straight. And one thing about sewing is that the further you get into the garment, the more inclination there is to rush or compromise on the finishing. I think I'd probably just taken my lunch and I got back onto it. Really wanted to make this look the absolute dog's bollocks. And at this stage, you're getting that sense of achievement that this is really something special that you're creating. It's looking like how it would do in the shops. And if you're making it for a customer, they're going to bite your arm off because they're not going to get this quality of making it anywhere else. Cool. So this last part is me sewing on my tabs, which you don't really need to have. You can either have, well, they're actually called epaulettes. You can either have those or you can sew on your belt loops. Because I didn't want a belt or any kind of feature like that, I just did my epaulettes at the back. Even things like this, when your machine cuts a thread, these are frustration points that can force you to rush it, but I urge you to take your time. Cool, and then I'm just attaching in place the top of my yoke on the inside, and I'm attaching that in line with the top stitch of my shoulder, just so it looks clean from both sides. And also you don't want that facing flapping around. So this is what am I doing now? I'm attaching the collar tape just to finish off that raw edge that was on the collar. And eventually I'm gonna stitch in my brand label. I've just used a regular like black cotton tape. You can use anything you want. You can use the denim if you want as well. So remember, when top stitching your epaulettes, take your time, make your epaulettes the same way you do your cuffs. Fold everything in, sandwich it, and then top stitch it from the outside. Because it's denim, it's too difficult to bag out. And when I first realized that, it was an absolute revelation and made the process so easier, because my epaulettes and my cuffs were never looking how how it does in the proper garments. And obviously it makes sense, you know, you're dealing with a very thick fabric. One thing I forgot to mention is, you know, when you're sewing your waistband, when you're closing it, just double check underneath that everything's looking as it should be, nothing's trapped in there, because that's a process you want to do once, and you want to make sure that there's no puckering, no unsightly puckering. Cool, nice. So the jacket is actually done now. I'm just gonna mark my buttons and buttonhole placements. Now we're gonna use an industrial buttonhole machine, a Reece 101. So you actually mark your buttonholes on the reverse side of the garment. So I'm just using a bit of chalk because obviously that will when we steam that will be all removed. Never use pen or pencil to mark a garment. Always use chalk, guys. You can actually get these pens that when you iron the garment, the mark goes. And I've seen a couple of my staff members use it, and they are a godsend. But don't use like magic markers or biros or dumb stuff like that. So again, with your buttonhole placements, measure everything. Yeah, don't do guesswork, guys, because there's many times I've made garments that they have been immaculately made, but then because I've rushed the marking of the buttonholes and the buttons, it just ends up looking, pretty haphazard, and it really just brings the quality down. I don't think there's any rule on the gap between buttonholes. For this one, I've used 8.5 centimeters. So it was just pretty much by eye. I guess if you want to be, unique in terms of your design, you can use more buttons and buttonholes. But the problem is if you use less, or a gap that's bigger than, I'd say 10 centimeters, then you get this issue of gaps in the kind of the garment that doesn't look nice when it's on the client's body or even your body. Now, there's two ways that you can mark your buttons. You can just mark your buttonholes first, and then once you've done your buttonholes, then you move on to marking your buttons afterwards, or you can, like I'm doing here, is mark both of them beforehand. Cool, you guys can see I'm wearing my famous Moncler imitation jacket. The video link is gonna pop up any moment now. So if you haven't seen that video, if that video hasn't brought you to my channel, go ahead and check out that video and see how I made a puffer jacket. So this is the Reece 101. A link is going to pop up of a kind of tutorial on how to use this machine. This machine is, I actually got this for £500 from a company that went bankrupt a few years back, but it retails for about £3 grand. A brand new buttonhole keyhole will set you back about £40,000. So even if you can't buy this machine yourself, I mean, we do buttonholes here, so you can get in touch and we can do buttonholes for you. But just get a really nice finish, and look how beautiful that is. The tension on that buttonhole is perfect. And we've actually used what's called we've used 3 threads on the buttonhole machine. We've got the top thread and the bottom thread, and then we've got what's called a gimbal, and it's a thick top stitch thread that goes all around the shape of the buttonhole, and that makes it stand proud, which is what you want with the buttonhole. You want it to be really bold, the tension to be perfect, and we've the thing is, if this was for a customer, I would have taken out the cutter, but I trusted the machine. I woke up this morning and I felt in tune with the buttonhole machine, and it did me right. Yeah, I mean, the choice of color thread was just perfect. So give myself a little pat on the back there. I got where did I get the threads from? I think I got it from William G. And also, like, when you get to our level of garment making, there's different sizes of threads that only different machines will take. So it's always good to know what size of thread your machine is going to take, guys, whether it's domestic or industrial. Up your knowledge by experimenting. This machine is an absolute nightmare to rethread. So the last thing you want to do is have any of the threads come undone. So we're doing a nice little close up on the buttonhole there. So you can see, you guys should be able to see that knife come down near the very end. So we're gonna start there and then bap. See the knife goes up and down very quickly. And that's what creates that puncture in the fabric and splits the buttonhole open. I mean, you can do it afterwards, but I always find that the finish of the opening cut is never as nice as when you have the buttonhole machine do it for you. I mean, I'm really looking forward to wearing this jacket. It's, yeah, I've really enjoyed just making it, choosing the fabric, and more importantly, the machines have just really behaved themselves. Cool, so I think we should be down to our last 1 or 2 buttonholes there. Cool. Nice. Okay, so now I'm gonna add the metal buttons. You normally get dies for this kind of thing. We've actually got a machine, a grommet machine that actually does all this for us, but I just wanted to kind of do all this myself, and yeah, because it was just for a sample. I was a bit torn in terms of what color like buttons to use. I did look for brass ones, but the brass ones that they were selling, they weren't really the right color. And then when I saw the silver on top of the dark denim with the kind of copper colored thread, I thought, yeah, this looks nice. And as you know, it's fashion, guys. There's no rules in terms of what to use with what. Those days are completely gone. But yeah, you can see that that is a beautifully made jacket. I have to give myself a pat on the back there. That guys is 20 plus years of experience, 20 plus years of making mistakes, 20 plus years of trial and error. So keep learning, guys. I'm still learning. Yeah. As long as you guys remain in love with the sewing process, with the process of making a garment, just keep at it. The thing is, you can tell I had a little break here because I got my red hoodie on. Cool. It's nicely coming together. And also, when you're doing things like your buttons, make sure you're working on a clean surface. You don't want the dust to get trapped into any part of the garment. Always make sure that your surface is sanitized as well. The thing is, I had a bit of trouble with these buttons at certain points, actually. These buttons, you have to hit them once in the right place, otherwise the prong at the bottom, it bends, and then you're never going to get the button through. I think this was one of them where I had a bit of a ditzy moment. Now the thing is, I'm using scissors to open, to create the opening for the kind of prong. Now there are certain times when you can just push the prong right through, or you can use like a eyelet machine, but you'd have to use the smallest opening. My theory with those is that it will make the opening too big, and then when you when you hammer the button down, the gap is so wide that the button's eventually going to come out. Because remember that with a denim jacket, it's not handled with care. It's a heavy duty garment, so someone with a heavy hand, they're not going to daintily try and do the buttons in. But yeah, okay, cool. So this is me modeling the jacket exquisitely. Yeah, really enjoyed this one. You can see the detail, the stitching, the tension was great on this one. I would probably say this was, of all the garments I've made, this would be in my top 10. Now, I hope you guys enjoyed that tutorial. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm probably going to do one for jeans next, so make sure that you are following the channel, watch other videos, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one, guys. Oh, and before I go, the making time for this denim jacket, it was 4 hours and 32 minutes from start to finish. So I think that was pretty decent. It took me half an hour to cut everything out, but 4.5 hours to make a denim jacket. I think that's pretty good going. But yeah, anyway guys, I'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.